and I will mute my mic and my camera, and then you will be in control. So you are now driving the ship. Jason and Mike, your show. Take it away, sirs.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Sharton. I am with 3M Company, and with me is Mike Anderson from Collision Advice, who I'm sure everybody knows. Say hello, Mike.
Hey, Jason. Thank you so much to Jason, to you and the team at 3M for allowing me to provide some commentary and insight for this. So it's your show, brother, and I'm just here to kind of just support what you're saying. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you to Collision Hub for allowing us to share some insights. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristen, Collision Hub. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As the schedule said, we're going to be talking about how we can account for body materials in the collision repair shop and what we're using. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Sharton. I've been with 3M for about 25 years. Most of that time has been spent in and amongst the automotive industry. The first half really kind of around the OEM side, design in, the assembly plants, and then the second half here has been around collision repair. So I'm happy to join you and talk about how 3M and other people are trying to help you stay afloat here these days. So even though this isn't that interactive of a meeting and we're not all sitting together, I do think it appropriate that we acknowledge the topics that are off limits, because certainly from a 3M standpoint, I'm going to have to bail out if all of a sudden there's the chat log starts exploding with people saying that they're going to do certain things, they're going to set prices, they're going to decide who they're going to work for, and all those sorts of things that are on this slide. So if this stuff starts to happen, I hope Kristen can help me and say, hey guys, we got to stop this. Otherwise, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to have to bail. So thank you very much, everybody. So in general, I kind of want to start with the basics and from ground zero here. After a vehicle has been in a collision, it's taken to a collision repair shop in general, where a shop estimator and an assurance adjuster work together to review the damage to the vehicle. They outline the repair processes and parts that are going to be needed. They calculate the amount of labor that's going to be required to complete the job. They're going to research the cost of parts, and they're going to identify any other items that should be included. And then they're going to negotiate and agree to final cost of repair. Now, maybe this is a little whitewash, but essentially this is what's happening, right? Even though we've got an estimating process, however, that is facilitated by standardized databases and software, there's a tremendous amount of subjectivity. Whether you go to whatever organization you work with, you're going to hear about, say, unforgettables or things that you're not including in your estimates that you should. And so that's the subjectivity that I'm talking about here. And a lot of this is because the estimating technologies and techniques that we're doing today are still based on practices that we established 50 to 60 years ago. And another final point here, and I know that Kristen and Michael underscore this too, robust documentation is critical for successful negotiations. If there's an OEM procedure, if there's something out there that says why you have to do a certain repair procedure a certain way, you need to have that documentation. So when it comes to material sales, 50 to 60 years ago, the major material expenses were really in the paint department, right? The liquids, the abrasives, the masking materials, that's where it all was. The body department really didn't have much, right? We were doing a lot of metal working, a little bit of lead. There wasn't much in the way of seam sealers. It was just a lot of welding and panel shaping. And so to keep estimating simple, the industry developed the practice of kind of averaging the cost of paint materials and then selling them at a standard rate per estimated paint department labor, so per paint labor hour. And if we look at our own estimates, we see that this practice is really still in place today. We can see here a line item on this estimate total where it says paint supplies. And if we were to do the math, we would find out that that is a number that's being taken times the number of paint labor hours, and then times their rate for paint materials. But over the last 60 to 70 years, as vehicles have grown faster, stronger, quieter, safer, and more fuel efficient, those body structures underneath the skin has grown more complex, and they demand materials that were not in use 50 to 60 years ago. Things like seam sealers, structural adhesives, sound deadening materials, advanced corrosion protection, right? And so while we've got all these new and costly materials that are required to repair vehicles correctly, those materials are not included in the way that we have established our paint material sales methodology. Does that make sense? That paint material sales is all around the paint department. It has nothing to do with the body department.
Yeah, and Jason, another comment, if I might, real quick, is that, you know, we have to look at that vehicle manufacturers, and I'm sure Jason from Collision Hub can comment on this, but as we see more and more vehicle manufacturers incorporating ADAS features and computers into their car, that adds to the weight, right? And so I think you're going to probably see, as we get more of these ADAS systems, the vehicle manufacturers are trying to keep the lower vehicle weight down for better fuel economy, right? So as the computers and cameras and stuff add weight, they got to figure out how to offset that, which is why we might see more alternate substrates. And that's why corrosion protection or the products you're referring to are going to be even critically just as important, if not more important, in the future.
Absolutely, Mike, and that's a great point. When we look at the changes that we've seen from a body structure standpoint over the last even 5 years, right? It's been tremendous, and we've only, you know, made it a certain way along the path to reaching the CAFE standards. And those CAFE standards really start kicking in 2025. So 5 years from now, we're going to see a lot more changing here in the next 5 years, and that pace of change is going to be at least 2, if not 3 times what we've seen over the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what operations are going to consume body materials in the back end of the shop. Say we've got this door skin and we're going to reskin it. And I know we don't do a lot of reskinning, but let's just roll with it because we can see the interior of this panel pretty well. Kristen, if you can launch that poll, what operations would we think we'd need to perform in order to reskin this door?
Well, I may be missing a poll question, Jason. I had 2, a sales issue, and then I had a numbers one. So I may have missed the poll on this one.
All right, then we'll just skip it. So what repair operations do we need? If you guys know, shout out in the chat. You know, this is kind of an interactive portion, and it's hard to do this way, but we'll give it a shot. Chances are we're going to be bonding that skin on. We're going to have some seam sealing. Yeah, we're going to clean adhesive off the door beam. Cavity wax, a great one. Sound deadener, you can see the sound deadener in there. In fact, we've actually got a sound deadening pad and liquid applied sound deadening there, as well as the foam in between the intrusion beam and the outer skin. Maybe chip or rocker guard on the outside there, depending on the design. Might be a molding on the outside that we're going to have to clean and retape. Could have underbody coatings. Again, it kind of depends on the design of the vehicle. And maybe we have to reattach a vapor barrier.
And Jason, can you expand a little bit, Jason, as to what LASD is, liquid applied sound deadening? A lot of shops may not be familiar with that term.
Sure. So when we talk about sound deadening, and you know, we're really adding, say, mass to a skin panel or something. And so that can take a variety of forms, right? There can be just a discrete patch that's adhesively bonded. If we're doing it in the aftermarket, it might be baked on if it's done from the factory, and may have a foil backing or something. And then we've got, you know, what is called liquid applied sound deadening. And so what we see there on the vehicle is, I kind of call them cornrows, right? They're a lot of rippled beads that are placed very, very close together. Maybe they're 5 to 10 millimeters in width, and they'll cover an area, probably a non-square area. It's probably kind of unique, shaped around the vehicle contours. And what that is sound deadening material that the factory actually extrudes or pushes out onto the panel with a little robotic head. And so instead of it being a die cut patch, it's actually, you know, applied to the panel and then sent through the bake ovens to harden up. And so that's where you'll see some of those corn rings. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So with this being going on, you know, what's the problem here? Well, collision repair shops not only purchase and inventory their repair materials for the body side, they have those in stock, but they use those materials in a way that is not in alignment to how they buy. So, for instance, they may buy 6 cartridges of seam sealer, but then they're going to use it across 15 different repair jobs with a different amount of seam sealer required for each job. And maybe there's a couple in between that didn't need any seam sealer, right? And so what happens is the shop doesn't have an easy way to generate an accurate job-specific invoice that itemizes each product that was required for that repair, specifies the exact or partial amount of each product that was used, and then generates an invoice value for those materials. And in a lot of cases, this is what our insurance partners are looking for. They want to handle it somewhat like parts because it's not part of that paint material allowance. And so if we as shops want to get reimbursed, we need to provide that invoice of what we needed for the vehicle we're working on.
Yeah, so Jason, let me just kind of comment a little bit on an accounting perspective. Is that okay, sir?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, listen, when you go and you buy seam sealer, you're probably buying seam sealer, weld-through primer, cavity wax, things like that from your local jobber distributor. What I encourage you to do is identify those as what we call stock parts. I'm going to say that again, stock parts. And what you need to do is when your jobber distributor sells those products to you, have them take those types of products and itemize them on a separate invoice so that your accounting department can apply those to your cost of goods sold on your profit and loss as a stock part. What we see a mistake a lot of bookkeepers or accountants make is they take your entire jobber distributor invoice and they post it to paint materials cost of goods sold. And what it does is that negatively impacts your paint materials profitability. So what you want to do is you want to track these items separately and you want to post them to your cost of goods sold. Now, if you buy in bulk, you can still post it to your cost of goods sold and then just kind of look at it over a quarterly period for your profit standpoint, right? Or you could put it on your balance sheet, but I don't recommend that. The other thing is you're probably itemizing these types of items like seam sealer, cavity wax, weld-through primer on your estimate as an aftermarket part. If that's what you're doing, you want to take, like if you're using CCC1's management system, you want to set that up as a parts code table so that what it does is it reclassifies that on the management system side. So when it pushes it to accounting, it classifies it as a stock part as a sale. If you're using like ProfitNet, ProfitNet has what's called detail line formatting, and you would reclassify every time I see the word seam sealer, weld-through primer, reclassify that for the accounting side as to stock part. So take and find out whatever management system you use, whether it's Mitchell's Repair Center, Summit Management System, Nexius, or whatever, and ask them, how can I set it up that when I see these words come over to my management system from an accounting perspective, I can reclassify the sale as stock parts and then get your jobber distributor to submit to you those types of products on a separate invoice so your accountant or bookkeeper can post it properly. There's also a great company out there called LM2, Lean Materials Management by Jim Compton. I think, Kristen, you did a webinar or something with Jim Compton several years ago through Cool Tools. That's also a way that Jim has reporting to track this. So you absolutely want to track these products separately, and you do not lump them into body shop supplies. You don't lump them into, paint materials. You want to break them out separately from an accounting perspective. So back to you, Jason.
Thanks, Mike. Those are great points. Again, I think sometimes from a profitability standpoint, we always lose track of the fact that, the devil's in the details sometimes.
Amen, brother.
And when we look at that jobber distributor bill, it's making sure that we know what's in there and that it's getting accounted for appropriately is important. I'm sure there are a lot of distributors and jobbers probably on, and their goal in life is to really help you as shops as much as possible, and so they try to be one-stop shops for you in a lot of cases. And so it doesn't surprise me when your jobber distributor is your source, or is selling you a refrigerator for the break room, or a large screen monitor for something else, because they're really trying to help you out and get you the tools that you need. But when you do that, let's remember, those aren't materials either, right? Those are either capital items or supplies for the shop or things like that. So again, making sure we dive into that just a little bit and get the accountant the information they need so we get a true view of our profitability is always important. So How can the collision repair materials planner from 3M help? Well, it helps you give the adjusters what they've been asking for, right? So CRiMP is a tool meant to assist everybody in the chain here of collision repair in the documentation and communication of what allied body repair materials are that are required for a safe and responsible repair plan for a specific vehicle. It gives you as a shop an efficient and accurate way to generate a material invoice that's specific to an individual repair order, and it allows for a fair and balanced resolution to the reimbursement of required body repair materials. All right, so how can CRiMP benefit the shop? Well, here's an example. This is a 2016 Honda Civic EX. And from the outside, just taking a look at the photos, the damage really kind of appears minimal. But when we take a look at what was actually damaged, the rear frame rails were impacted here, and this was a very extensive repair. In fact, the screenshot I have here, I don't think was the final on it after supplements. But in this one, the shop sold $600 in paint materials, and then they had an additional $215 in body materials that they actually line itemed out in the estimate. But, you know, as good as that is, it probably wasn't enough. In this case, you know, the seam sealers they used, they estimated that on the invoice, selling that for $200. And they had a shop cost of those seam sealers that they used of about $125. So that's good. Quite honestly, you know, a lot of us probably default to just putting $25 in seam sealer on a lot of estimates, but they went ahead and did a great job up front. If they were to use the CRiMP tool, however, they would have come up with a value a little higher than that, $225. They included cavity wax on their estimate, another great job there. They put $15 for cavity wax. The amount that they used, however, cost the shop over $40, and CRiMP estimate on that same thing would have been about $73.
So real quick, Jason,
yeah,
if I may. So for everyone that understands CRiMP, stands for Collision Repair Materials Planner, correct? So the I is kind of silent, I believe. So what it does is, ladies and gentlemen, this is an online web-based invoicing system. And what it's doing, it's giving you the list price for what this 3M product would cost. And if I think what Jason, the point he's saying here, we really need to listen to is this shop actually lost money, right? They lost money. So let's just say that it was an average RO of $3,000 and they lost $148. Ladies and gentlemen, that was probably a 5% net profit they lost on that job. This is big money, right? Those days of just kind of lumping it all in there and guessing is just by the wayside. So Jason, this is some smoking hot stuff right here, bro.
No, you hit the nail on the head there, Mike. As good as the shop did and put down materials in amounts that we would normally see, they did a pretty good job. They were not using CRiMP at the time. And as they got onto CRiMP, they started to realize, hey, there's sound deadening, there's weld-through primer. Heck, we even use nozzles for the 2-part materials and some of the 1-part materials that we should be charging for. And so CRiMP would have actually increased their profit by $415, and they would have made money rather than lost money on the body materials here on this job. So again, take a look at your own paint and material profitability. If we have an example shop here, Scott, say a door rate of $48 an hour, and I know things vary across the nation. Say they had a material door rate of $28, and in our example, they do about $200,000 in vehicle repair sales each month. They do 80 repair orders in a month, and the average severity is $2,500. Yes, it's a little low, but guess what? The math gets a lot easier when we use those types of numbers. Say they go to their 20 group, they meet with their accountant, and they're looking at their profitability by department, and they say, hey, you know, paint materials, we got a goal of selling 10% of our total sales and materials, and you know, we have a gross profit of 40%. Our actual gross profit is much less than that. It's 33.6%. We're not, you know, cutting things here. We're missing the mark on paint materials. So, you know, what can we do here? What's going on? So what 3M can help do is take a look at this. And if we start peeling the onion here and seeing what's actually going on, we have this little diamond I call the you know, customer analysis diamond. And if we say, hey, all right, our total repair order sales, $200,000. All right, that's what they're doing. And 10% of that is their goal for sales and paint materials. So 10% of 200,000 is $20,000. So their goal for paint material sales is $20,000 each month. Now, again, based on their goal information, what they want to do, what their business plan is, they say the gross profit they want to make on paint materials is 40%. So 40% of that $20,000 sale in paint materials gets us to $8,000 in gross profit from paint materials each month, their goal. And so if we subtract those two, they sell 20,000 and they have a gross profit of 8,000, that means the difference is what they spent on it. So their goal for cost in paint materials is $12,000. Now, what's the other word we use for a goal for cost? A budget. And so their budget for paint materials each month was about $12,000. So when we look at that sheet, we see that, yeah, they missed the mark. They were at 33.6% gross profit on paint materials. Their actual gross profit that month was $5,932 from paint materials. All right. So they've got a gap. They didn't do what they wanted to do. They've got a gap of $2,068. They missed out on $2,068 worth of gross profit somewhere. And so the question becomes, is it a sales issue or is it a cost issue?
Jason, I have this one ready for you if you're ready to launch it.
Well, not yet,
Okay.
a little bit. All right, thank you though. So when we look at this, is it a sales issue or a cost issue? We can't answer this, all right? We don't have all the information. We need to peel that onion one layer more, and we go back to our account and we look at that sheet and we start finding some things out. And we see that their actual sales of paint materials was $17,668, and their actual cost was $11,736. So now, Kristen, let's launch that poll. Based on this information, does this shop, our example shop, have a sales issue or a cost issue?
Polls up and going, Jason. People are starting to respond.
Excellent. So again, they sold 17.6, 17.7, and they spent 11,736. Do they have a sales problem or do they have a cost problem? That's keeping them from reaching their gross profit goal.
And the survey says,
Are we ready? Give everybody
Let's
like
let
a
us
couple
have it.
more seconds. All right. So I'm going to hit end on this poll. And 89% of our respondents believe that it is a sales issue.
That's right. If we look at it, they have a sales issue because they didn't sell as much as they wanted. They wanted to sell 20,000, right? But they only sold 17.7. When we look at their costs, they're actually under budget, right? Their budget was $12,000 and they actually spent 11.7. All right, so we've got a sales issue in this case. So, again, the back end of the shop, they were considerate responsible, right? They fit within their budget, but we didn't bring in enough up front. So if we were to focus on just paint materials, because there's other ways to resolve gross profit issues, but if we were to, keep things in our silos and say, all right, paint materials needs to stand on its own, we've got to improve our gross profit in paint materials, we're going to have to sell more. And so if we've got a gap, right, in our gross profit of just over $2,000, if we're doing 80 repair orders each month, that means we're going to have to generate almost $26 in material sales. And like to Mike's point, another way of doing this is by calling them parts and dealing with it that way. But if we're just going to focus on the material aspect here, $26 per repair order in additional sales would get you there. All right. Now, sometimes that's hard to do, to get something, an additional sale on every single repair order. That can be difficult to do. You've got relationships with certain insurance partners or things that would maybe prevent you or make it a little bit more difficult to do this. So let's target, a lower number of repair orders that we need to impact. Let's say we only get something on 20% of the ROs that we complete in a month, 1 out of 5. At least 80% of the repair orders, we're not going to do anything different on. But if we could get something more on 20%, that would help us. And if we got 20% of our ROs, we got an average of $130, $129.25. You know what? We'd fill that gap. All right. So how could we get $130? So before we move forward, and we all need to understand, and Mike, you've kind of shared this with the industry, and I have to admit it makes a ton of sense, and we've used it when talking about CRiMP. You know, if you want to effectively sell body materials, whether it be as a part or a material, however you do it, you really need to understand and document if those materials are required, right? Because if they're not required, why are you using them, right? So first and foremost, are they required? What's your documentation there? Secondly, you need to understand if they're not included already. If they're included in something else, well then we've already accounted for them. But if they're required and not included, we should keep moving forward. We should understand the amount of that material that we're going to use. You know, are we going to use a cartridge? Are we going to use 8 ounces? What is it? And then we need to understand how much those body materials are worth, right? So if we know that it's required and we know that it's not included, we can show that we used, you know, 1.2 cartridges, and we know that each cartridge is $75. We should have all the information we need to effectively sell these materials. All right, and this is what the collision repair materials planner has been designed around. So when we take a look at, you know, these repair operations, we're talking about reskinning that door. You know, are these repair operations, how do they come into it? How would these have been included in the estimate when the front office prepared things, right? Are they included in what was done? Well, typically, in a lot of cases, all that we would have probably seen on the estimate is a line, replace door skin, right? There would have been a couple $100 for parts in the way of the sheet metal, right? So many body hours, so many paint hours. And that's, in a lot of cases, all that would have been there. But when we're writing that estimate, the information providers, what are they including in that replace door skin operation? All right, for reskin door, what are we doing there? So the first thing we need to do is understand how labor times are established and what they include. So we get that.
So Jason, yeah, it looks like we had a couple comments in the chat box. One is from Cheryl, and she just said, if it's not on your estimate sales issue, these are special materials not required on every job. And I just want to validate what she's saying. You know, I think it's important that you stress to everyone that these are hypothetical situations, right? But you know, if a job doesn't need it, you certainly shouldn't be billing for it. And I'm in total agreement with her on that. So it's a case-by-case basis. To replace a fender, you might have some adhesive between the fender and the A-pillar area, right? Like a structural adhesive or a foam in between there. If you're replacing a door skin, then obviously you're going to need certain things versus if it's a door shell. So I think she brings a valid point, and just want to make sure we recognize it for her. And then also Daryl, he said, you know, if somebody's not making a profit, it could be an upfront discount issue. I think what he's referring to is like some companies will give what's called prebates on the paint side, not necessarily on the allied product side. And yes, that could also affect your gross profitability. So valid comments from both of the people that sent in chats. Just want to recognize them, sir.
No, absolutely. And Cheryl, you're right. And that's why I think CRiMP, the Collision Repair Materials Planner, does resonate so well with our insurance partners, right? Is because these materials aren't used on every job. And so putting $25 in seam sealer on every job isn't fair and accurate, right? It isn't, we didn't use seam sealer, but we're going to put it on the estimate because we put it on everyone. No, CRiMP helps you itemize and put a value to what you did use on the job, right? And so that's a perfect point. So when we look at labor times, the first thing we got to really talk about is the labor premise. And the labor premise basically is what the information companies use to determine the amount of labor associated with a procedure. They start with an average skill technician, you know, somebody who's got, say, 5 to 7 years of experience. And they tell them, okay, here's the job you're going to do. This is what we want you to do. We want you to reskin this door or whatever it is. Now, go gather your tools, equipment and materials, and we're starting our stopwatch. And then we want you to install a new undamaged part onto a new undamaged vehicle. Then you're going to put your tools and equipment away. And then you're going to clean up your stall, everything that you got dirty, and get ready for the next repair. All right. And then we're going to stop our stopwatch. So that's what goes into the labor premise and how they do a time study. Now, a couple of things that pop up is, new undamaged part onto a new undamaged vehicle. How often, I think you've got some response buttons, yes, no, on the participants panel. So if you see that, go ahead and vote in on yes or no. But how many of you have ever installed a new undamaged part on a new undamaged vehicle? Right? That's not our business, right? Every vehicle damage is unique, and the situation in which we have to install a part is unique. And sometimes those parts, as they come out of the box, don't quite fit, right? And so a part might be a little damaged. So we're constantly doing things where we're installing slightly damaged parts onto a damaged vehicle. And since that's always variable, it's different in every situation. The only way to get, call it a baseline or a consistent, repeatable time study is to say, we're only going to use new undamaged parts on new undamaged vehicle. And then we can get a good average that we can use for our time study. And anything that deviates then from an undamaged part or an undamaged vehicle goes into what we call judgment time, and can and should be used to adjust the labor for that job. Well, that's a whole nother issue that I'm not even going to get into. But everything here in the labor premise is about time, right? It's the time it takes to complete a job. What does the labor premise here say about materials, right? The only thing it really says about materials is we're going to include the time it takes to go get your materials in the labor time, right? You got time to go get them. You got time probably to use them if that's, part of the procedure, but that's all it says. So labor times do not include, and if you look at all three major guides, whether it be from Autotex, CCC, or Mitchell, they all agree and state that body material costs are not included in the labor time. And if you think about it, that makes sense, right? Because labor time is in hours, tenths of hours. Material costs are in dollars. There is no straight conversion between labor time and dollars and how much you would pay. The units don't match up. So body material costs are not included in the labor time. So when we look at these operations that we all came up with for reskinning that door skin or that door, which of these operations include the cost of materials? Do any of them? No. None of these operations include the cost of materials, right? Now the labor time, which isn't something we're really touching on here much, if at all, that's different. Some of these operations include the labor time to apply the materials, some of them don't. It depends on the situation, it depends on what system you're using, and sometimes these things change throughout the year, so we have to stay up to date on the guides associated with our estimating system. But in every case, the material costs are not included. But wait a minute, right? How are you getting paid for materials? Aren't you getting paid for materials through this material refinish allowance rate? Where it's so many dollars per paint labor hour. Well, materials are always not included in the labor times established by the leading information providers. All right, but in North America, we've got this accepted practice, which is to use the paint and material rate that you've determined for your own shop, and we're going to multiply that by the number of paint refinish labor hours in order to determine a sales amount for the materials consumed on the paint side, right? So if we were to ask the DEG or go to the information providers themselves, they'll say, hey, that practice is outside our labor term, our labor times. Yes, we included a field for it in our estimating software, So you can put it in, but again, we're not telling you that you need 3 hours worth of materials to do this job. That is completely outside of what they're doing. So one question for you, probably need to think about, how is your particular paint material rate determined? And what does it include, right? Does it include everything that you're using on the paint refinish side? Something to think about. On the body repair side, right, on the body side, in our body department, we have no common practice in North America, at least, for the materials consumed in this body repair department in those processes. Now, I know in the estimating databases, the estimating software, in a lot of cases, there actually is a field for a body material rate per body labor hour. And I think I've been in maybe 3 shops across the nation that were actually using it. And if you're doing that and you're comfortable with that, that's certainly a way to go. But again, I think we all do much better if we're actually specifying and keeping track of the materials that we're using on specific jobs. Because again, as Cheryl and Mike reminded us, these are special materials that really aren't being used on every single job. So how does CRiMP work? Again, Mike reminded us that it's an online system. It's a website that you get an account on. And how do you get an account? Well, you're going to work with your local 3M representative, your local 3M collision repair specialist, because they're going to be the one to create your account on CRiMP. They're going to provide on-site training. They're going to show you how it works and give you some materials to really help you along the way. I think there was a comment earlier on our quality control checklist and some of the other documentation that we have. So again, there's a nice package that comes along with the training to really equip your estimators, you as shop managers, even some for the technicians, to really help you get on board and understand how this program works. Once you're set up on CRiMP, kind of a best practice would be as vehicles enter the shop, your repair planners go through and they document what and where materials are needed, and they gather some basic dimensions. So again, in an ideal world, our repair planners are working with technicians to do a disassembly for repair. They're documenting what needs to be replaced. They're researching some of those repair procedures with the OEMs. And in that information, they're going to see call outs for materials, whether it be sealers or structural adhesives, sound deadeners, those sorts of things. So this is a great time to start documenting what's required and how much you're going to need. While you're doing it, you can go ahead, use a tape measure. 3M actually has a masking tape that is marked like a ruler that you can use for this, and lay that out around the damaged area or where you're going to put seam sealer, so you can measure it right there. Take a photograph, so you're doing your documentation along the way that, I measured this out and I need a seam sealer bead that's 6 feet 2 inches long in this area. Right? But this is a great place to do it when you're doing disassembly for repair. Once you have those dimensions and what materials are going to be needed, your estimator can create a material plan in CRiMP, and maybe the repair planner is doing it live. But there's a guided input wizard in your account that will walk people through putting the materials into the invoice, helping you estimate how much you're going to need based on the basic dimensions, and putting everything on a summary sheet. When you're done with the application, the repair order, CRiMP as a tool generates 2 documents, right? It creates a material plan document, which can head back to the back of the shop and given to the technicians that are assigned to the repair. So now they've got an outline of these materials that I need to make sure that I have. I can go to the cabinet, I can go to the stock room, wherever our materials are being handled, and pull out what I need to make sure I have it for this job when it gets to me. And it also gives them some guidelines as far as, all right, this is how much we're expecting to use. We see a lot of this with cavity wax. Cavity wax is a huge component in maintaining the corrosion protection of a vehicle. And too often we see that if cavity wax is being used, and that's been rare, there's not enough of it being used. It's kind of a puff with the aerosol can. And realistically, we need to get 3 good coats in whatever space we're coating here. And so CRiMP will help estimate how much in this case, cavity wax we should be using to make sure that the technicians are aware that, no, I guess they're anticipating we're going to use a half a can on this job, not just a couple of puffs. CRiMP also generates what we call a material invoice, and this is what can be included in the estimate and final bill. Again, you're probably going to use the parts code table as Mike referenced to go ahead and get those on the estimate as line items. But for backup documentation, you've got this document which outlines by repair application for a repair order all the materials and the amount and what it's worth. So again, you've got that backup. You can add that to the photos that you took during repair planning and really have a nice documentation package. Finally, a 3M rep, your collision repair specialist, can review your shop's CRiMP activity to really highlight success and any opportunities for improvement on a regular basis. So we can look at how much each shop is doing and which writer is writing what. We can show you what vehicles you're writing for. So sometimes that's a good way to identify some templates that you could create to really make things stream faster. So we look at come back and we take a look at our example shop here. And again, same shop doing $200,000 a month, 80 repair orders per month, and same goals, right? But now that they've been using CRiMP, they've had additional paint material sales in this case. It could have been done via parts and things reconciled, but they sold additional materials via CRiMP of $2,154, and they got it on 25% of repair orders, so that comes to an average of just under $108 per repair order for the repair orders that they got. All right, so how did that change our customer needs analysis diamond? Well, what were their total repair order sales? Well, it's $200,000 that they normally do, plus those additional sales of $2,154, right? And so that's their total sales. Now, they have a goal of selling 10%. So that gets us to $20,215 in goal sales for paint materials. They have a goal of 40% of those, that number being in gross profit. So just over $8,000 in expected gross profit. And our budget, is just over that $12,000 because we sold a little bit more at $12,129. All right. So our actual sales actually increased, right? It was $17,668, and we added $2,154. So our actual paint material sales now are $19,822. But one question here, did we spend any more money to generate those sales? We were probably already putting those seam sealers and adhesives on the job, right? We were using cavity wax, we were using sound deadening because that's what the OEM says we need to do, but we weren't charging before. So we were already buying that. So our actual costs probably don't change. We already were buying the materials, we just weren't selling them. And so our costs remain the same at $11,736. So when we subtract our costs from our sales, we see that our gross profit comes in right on the money. And this is an example, so I'm allowed to cook the books a little bit. I doubt it would be this clean in real life. But we've closed the gap in this situation. Now, if we look, we're still under budget, which is great. And we're still not selling probably as much as we could or we want. But because we were under budget, we were able to maintain our gross profit goal. All right, so what's CRiMP worth? We're talking $108 or $124 per repair order. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, especially for a shop who's turning $200,000 every month, and everybody's really busy, right? So who's going to do this? Well, let's say your shop, you're a similar shop, right? If you could generate that extra $2,154 in additional material sales like this example shop did, you did that every month, that's equivalent to just under $26,000 a year in additional sales. Again, this is peanuts. But as a shop, you didn't have to spend any more to generate those sales. And I've had some people come back and say, well, I have to pay somebody to actually put it into CRiMP. And I said, fine. If you were doing it on 25% of the repair orders, $20 per labor hour, and I'll give you $2 or 0.2 hours, 0.2 to get it done per repair order. That comes to about $960 in labor. So all the additional revenue drops to the bottom line. Everything else drops to the bottom line because there's no additional cost, right? So if your net profit before taxes is 10% of total sales, right? So if you sell $200,000, you net 10% after the fact. So that's netting $20,000, 10%. In order to have an impact of, you know, 200 $24,000, almost $25,000. If you drop $25,000 to the bottom line, that has an impact that's 10 times greater than that, or almost $250,000 of additional work if you wanted to have that same result. So you'd have to do $250,000 more in collision repair to have the same impact of dropping $25,000 to your bottom line through CRiMP. Now, if your average severity is $2,500, this is equivalent to about 100 more cars, right? $250,000 divided by $2,500 per vehicle is 100 more cars. How many vehicles per month was this shop doing? Who remembers? They were doing $200,000 a month in sales. Their average severity was $2,500. Who remembers?
About 80 cars a month.
Exactly. They were doing about 80 repair orders each month. And so CRiMP gives them the equivalent of 100 more cars in a year. That's more than an extra month's worth of production in a year. 13 months in a year to hit your numbers. All right. And so one of the things we know, though, from our involvement as 3M, that if you're a shop doing this amount of work, $2.4 million a year, this almost $26,000 that you're selling in additional material sales should be enough to cover the costs of all your body filler, glazes, adhesives, coatings, seam sealers, NVH, and all your abrasives, with enough left over to buy pizza for the shop every single Friday. So whether you're looking at its bottom line impact and what the equivalent it is at the top line, or the fact that, you know what, you're paying for a huge chunk of your jobber bill, a little bit goes a long way here. So some key takeaways. Number one, materials are always not included in the labor times. There's always probably an opportunity for additional labor. You need to understand that. We didn't really cover that. There's a ton of people who talk about those additional labor opportunities, and they probably exist for a lot of these operations. You need to have a repeatable methodology. Know what you're doing and put it in place. Have a standard operating procedure around estimating for materials. Documentation is king. You know, if there is a document that says this material is required, print it off. Make sure you're documenting that. Be prepared to overcome any objections to change, because this is change. This is something new that a lot of people haven't seen. And so do the research and the math and understand how a little bit can go a long way to your business. And I hope that this has been helpful for you. So how can you get access to CRiMP? Well, our people out in the field, our collision repair specialists, really are the ones who administer these accounts and get you signed up. So, you know, contact your local 3M rep and ask them about getting a CRiMP account. If you don't know who your local 3M rep is, talk to your jobber and ask to be connected to your local 3M rep. They'll help you. And if those two fail you for whatever reason, you can go ahead and send an email to this email address, 3m_CRiMP@mmm.com, and just let us know, you know, that you're looking for access to CRiMP, what your name and contact information is, and the name and address of your shop so we can get it taken care of. And we'll work with you to get the information, access, and training. It's going to keep you successful here. So at this point, I'm going to pause for any questions. Thank you for your attention, your business, and any other questions that are coming through. Kristen?
Mike's been doing a great job in the chat room. Mike, you're hired, man, full time. Yeah. I don't know what that's going to cost me, but you're hired. So Mike, have you seen anything in there we need to scroll back through and answer publicly for everybody that might just be listening on the phone and has missed some of that chat conversation?
You know, I think there was a lot of questions in there about insurance reimbursement. Will insurance companies use it? I've got over 300 and some private clients that I do in my 20 groups, Kristen, and I can tell you the majority of them all use that, and they get reimbursed on CRiMP on a regular basis. You know, I'm not going to deny there may be some education that you have to do to validate it to an insurance appraiser. You know, that's a knucklehead, right? To just say, hey, here's what the basis of this is, right? But I got to tell you, I know tons of shops that are using this, because and I think as Cheryl put it in there, right, is that, it's the list price, right? So what your cost is nobody's business. It's just like buying a part. A fender has a list price. It's not what your cost is. It's what the list price is. And this is all based off of 3M's, off their list price. And I think the critical part is that if shops get greedy and they start charging like 6 tubes and they only use 2, well, that's fraud. And then that just screws it up for everybody. So don't be a jerk. Yeah,
the other thing to keep in mind is that an insurer is not entitled to anything you have unless you have a DRP relationship in which you've contractually agreed that they have a right to everything that you have, your invoices, etc. But as a repairer, you don't have a contractual obligation with the insurer, even if you feel like they're the ones writing the check. So just keep in mind, an insurer can't really ask you for anything. So, what you choose to share documentation wise is based on your relationship with the customer who chose you. And then you need to have all those conversations with them first. So I get really frustrated when I visit shops and find out that that they just hand over wads of paper and invoices and everything without having those discussions with the vehicle owner. So, they chose you. That's their conversations to have with reimbursement and all of those things. And, Mike, when you were running your shop, you did that with a customer. They were your primary conversation, not the insurer. And that was part of your power. And so that's what, Larry and I talk on and on and on about is just remember who's in charge in your shop. And shops that do very well with that don't have compensation problems. So
yeah, and I think too, another point that Cheryl, I got to meet this Cheryl, right? Is that make sure if you have something that might have a limited shelf life, like 6 months, and you're like, man, I've never even used this part. I don't even keep it in stock. It's something I just ordered for this specific job. You may not use the whole thing. I see that a lot when you buy like materials from like OEMs that sell their own products that are private labeled. You got to make sure you look at that expiration date. So man, you got a really great group of knowledgeable followers here, Kristen. Great questions from your followers at Collision Hub, and really good questions.
Yeah. So some of the things I'm seeing here are, questions around, the price of CRiMP, and I probably should have done that. This is kind of abbreviated seminar, but CRiMP doesn't have a cost, right? So the only cost to using CRiMP is that you got to be using the 3M materials that you're claiming on these invoices and in the material plan. So there is no individual cost for the tool itself. Another thing is there are material calculators, and we talked just a little bit about it, but every product for every application has a calculator based on simple, straightforward dimensions. So again, during that repair planning process, if you see that you need a bead, a seam sealer, all you need to do is measure out, the length of seam sealer you're going to need, how wide the bead is, how tall the bead is, and what shape. Is it round? Is it flat? Is it something in between? And when you go into CRiMP, you can type those pieces of information into the calculator, and it will give you an estimate based on what material you're using. If you need to figure out how much foam you're going to need, you give it the dimensions of the cavity you're going to fill. If you have a dent and you want to calculate body filler or something else, maybe a divot in plastic, you get the size of the damage, and it'll extrapolate out how much material you're going to use.
It's perfect. And it's a great time for shops to be thinking about this. When you're doing just, production style work and everything is, from the moment the doors open to the moment the doors close at night, you feel like you're running 1,000 miles an hour. It's hard to start thinking about working extra things into your process. It was a great comment, Jason, about building an SOP around different stages of estimating, right? And what makes a great estimator, separates the two is that you'll usually find the great estimator has some sort of process that they repeat every time. But implementing that's hard when we feel like it's all we can do all day long just to, get done what we already have on the plate. So as we start to see this, kind of for some of us, I've seen shops, Mike, I know you have too, says they're not slowing down at all.
Nope.
Some of us are slow. So while we have that slow time, it's a great time to be implementing things that drive your bottom line profitability. Sure, I want a clean shop. Sure, I love it when I get to, mark off where all the tools go. But if that's not driving money to my accounts right now, it's not high on my priority list of things to do while I'm waiting for, everything to reopen again.
Yeah, I mean, like now would be a great time to Also, just figure out how much seam sealer out of a 1/4 inch bead you could get out of a tube versus an 1/8 inch or a 1/2 inch. Go ahead and build those standards now. Use your iPhone to take a video of it to prove this is how much actually comes out of there. I mean, I agree with you, Kristen. There's a lot of positive things they could be doing. They're going to give them instant bottom line revenue.
We have a contest between Ryan and like Sean Collins where they like try to race to see how much material could get out of a tube, because I'm thinking that's quality video I would watch.
Yeah.
Just
be like a Pinewood Derby for seam sealer.
This is what happens, Mike, when you and I aren't on the road.
Yeah.
Could get dangerous. So a lot of great feedback. Again, this presentation will be available for replay. So if you're a shop owner, manager, or you're one estimator in the shop and you took the time today, this is a great one to replay for everyone in the shop, technicians, estimators, owners. If your parts department also is in control of material and inventory, like for that stuff, phenomenal one to replay. It'll be up for this afternoon. And then 3M's back a couple of more times with us this month. So we'll have a few more presentations from them, but it's a great tool. Make sure to visit with your jobber rep or your 3M rep if you happen to have their direct contact. And then if not, Jason's got that email up there, 3M_CRiMP, CRiMP @mmm.com. I keep having to remind myself. I got a lot of people that are just dialed in with us, and I need to get better at verbalizing what's on the screens for some people. We are back this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and we're going to be talking about the new roles of the estimator. It plays off of this because I think for a lot of us who've been estimating 20 or more years, we never thought that we had to estimate material. We went out and looked at damage, like the car behind me, and we kind of looked at parts. And now we're estimating completely new things, and so we kind of have to rethink our job description. Mike, anything to add, sir?
No, thank you, Kristen, so much to you and the followers of Collision Hub for the opportunity. Thank you, 3M, for your support of our industry. And special shout out to all of our first responders and those working in the medical fields and all those essential businesses and collision repairers are helping to keep them on the roads. And just love you all and mean it. And very, very thankful. Thank you.
We got some great shops that are on here that are also EMTs and firefighters. So yeah, like Jack in St. Louis, who's a full-time firefighter, but also a shop owner. We got Josh out in Maryland, who's also an EMT on the weekends. So just some fantastic shops out there. Jason, anything else to add, sir?
No, I just echo Mike's comments. Thanks to Collision Hub. Thanks to all the people that joined in today from 3M. We wish you the best. We appreciate your business and your partnership in the industry, and just let us know how we can help.
All right. Well, we are good to go. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kristen. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.